this is vlog number 4, the University of Wolverhampton Doctoral College vlog series. Put my teeth in and get that right. This vlog we're going to be talking about the Viva, and this is one of 3 vlogs that we're going to do. This one's going to focus on preparation for the Viva, followed by a vlog that's going to talk about how you manage the Viva, and the third vlog is going to talk about what happens after the Viva. So, preparing for Viva. What are your top tips?
Let's set the scene. You've submitted your thesis on the 1st of March.
Yep.
You're exhausted. You feel you've done a great job, and finally it's over. And this monkey that's been on your shoulder for 3 or 4 years is kind of off. But then you get an email saying, we'll invite you to the Viva, which would be on 1st of May.
Okay.
A month later. So what do you do in the weeks you've got before?
2 months later.
Sorry, 2 months later. Okay. So what do you do in the weeks before? How do you begin to prepare?
I would say, first of all, have a bit of a break from your thesis. Not a long break, obviously, but kind of walk away from it and rest. Have a bit of a holiday. Because don't have a holiday, don't book a holiday for 2 months after you've submitted your thesis, because that's probably when your Viva's going to be. And I've had a situation as an examiner where we've organised a date to get the examiners and the chair together, and we go back to the student and say, okay, this is going to be the date of your Viva, and the students come back and say, oh, I'll be in Spain then. I'm on holiday. So yeah, have the break straight after you've submitted your thesis. Celebrate that submission. And then you can come back to your Viva with fresh eyes. And I think it's really important to read the Viva, to read the thesis again. You know your work, you know it inside out, but it's a good idea to go back and read it, because you will notice those few typos or grammatical errors that you can highlight. You don't need to go into the Viva and say, oh look, I found these typos, but one of the corrections that you're going to get is if there are typos or grammatical errors in there, they're going to ask you to correct those, so it's a good idea to have highlighted them as you're reading through.
I think when you're reading it as well, it's perhaps a good idea to create a quite detailed index. So what questions you're dealing with in each section, what examples you've used, how this one section then feeds into another section, because it can be very difficult to remember everything in a very substantial PhD thesis. And the examiners are probably going to be honing in on various bits and pieces. They're going to say to you, so where is it you deal with this? So where's your accounting for that? And I think you need to be able to say, you'll find that on page 110. And with that index that you can prepare, you should then be able to achieve that. Because I think one of the challenges of the Viva is to force the examiners back onto the thesis. Don't let them sit back and say, oh, it's not terribly detailed, is it? You have to say, well, okay, let's look at page 50. Here I look at this case study. I give these details. How much more detailed do you think this could be? When you force them back onto your home territory, I think it's easier than when they're just making general speculative comments. So you need to be terribly familiar with your thesis.
Yes.
And you've just written it, and it sounds like an odd thing to say, be familiar with it, but it's easy to forget across, it can be 80, 100,000 words.
Yep.
So familiarise yourself.
Well, the University of Wolverhampton, it won't be 100,000 words, it will be either 45,000 words if you're a science student, it will be 40,000 words if you're a postdoc student, or 90,000 words if you're in education, health, wellbeing, or social sciences. Yeah. Did you know that you can get A5 post-it notes?
I did not.
Well, you can. And this is what I send my students out to look for when they're prepping for their Viva. Because if you can have an A5 post-it note at the beginning of each of your chapters with anything that's really important that you want to remember. So bear in mind, you can you can take your thesis into the Viva. I've been asked this before with students who've said, am I allowed to take it in? And we're like, yes, we're not expecting you to remember 80,000 words. So pop a post-it note at the beginning of each of the chapters and write all those important things. So that might be theorists, dates, quotes, anything that you think is really important that you want to remember about that particular chapter. And that's where you might want to have that bit of an index on there as well. I always say to my students, put a post-it note into the so that it sticks out at the top of your thesis for the beginning of each chapter, because examiners will say, okay, let's now move to chapter 2, or let's move to chapter 3, and sometimes they won't go into great detail on one of the chapters, so you need to be able to move through quite quickly, and that will help. I often tell students to be careful, not to take loads of things into a Viva with them. You take your thesis, you take your bottle of water, and you look your gonk or whatever, but don't kind of turn up with copies of papers, files full of notes, because you're going to get lost in between, moving between those notes and the thesis. So that's why I think these big post-it notes are really useful.
And also the Viva's discussion, so you don't need to be writing down what they're saying to you. They'll give you the feedback afterwards.
Yeah.
So you really just need to be there in conversation defending your particular work. I would say that this process of familiarization and drawing up an index might take maybe a week.
Okay. I
would estimate it at that point. So if between submission and Viva you've got a month, I wouldn't spend 5 weeks solidly working. I'll take the holiday that you mentioned for a couple. There are a few other things we're going to come to in a second. But then maybe a week or 2 weeks before the actual date, that's when you maybe begin to refamiliarize yourself with the thesis. And I think when you do that as well, it's good perhaps to preempt 2 questions that often come out. One is, what do you think is the best part of the thesis? What are you the most proud of? Where in the thesis have you really contributed to new knowledge? And to find those parts, and then to make a note that in the course of the Viva you really do want to talk about the great archival research you did in chapter 4, what you discovered and no one else has discovered, and here it is in chapter 4. So to highlight the key messages you want to get across, but also conversely, they will sometimes say, what's the worst part of the thesis, or what are you least satisfied about, or what would you do again, or how would you do it differently? And I think it may be good to find some sections where you can say, there were challenges here that I'm not sure if I overcame, or that this particular material really put some stresses on my methodological approach that maybe it did or didn't manage it. What do you think? So to define the best and the not so good elements can be useful.
Students usually find the former much easier to do. They get scared about the latter, and because they're saying, well, am I shooting myself in the foot if I highlight where there's a weakness in my thesis? First of all, the examiners have read it and they will notice that. And secondly, a doctorate is a learning journey. It's almost like your apprenticeship for research. We're not expecting your PhD or your doctoral thesis to be Nobel Prize winning. So we're interested in the learning that you've achieved through the process. So you're not shooting yourself in the foot, you're actually showing that you're reflexive, that you can identify what you've done and what you could have done better and how you would have done it better.
I do agree with that. So, what about training elements?
Most the University of Wolverhampton run Viva workshops, and we run hot seats. So the Viva workshops look at the practical things, what you would expect in your Viva, who's going to be there, what their roles are, how long a Viva might be, because it's how long is a piece of string really. We look at the areas in which questions might be asked, because we can't actually say what questions are going to be asked in your Viva. That's going to be down to your examiners and your piece of work. And as an examiner, we often examine through the lens of our own research experience. So, you know, it would be hard for me to say what questions you might ask in a Viva and vice versa, because we've got two different research fields. So the hot seat provides students with the opportunity of sitting down and being asked Viva type questions in front of a panel of examiners, which is usually you and I, and also some of their peers, and get some feedback about what we felt they did well, feedback from people watching as well, what they felt they did well, and where those answers could be strengthened a little bit. And that's useful to be in that hot seat, but also useful to view it as well.
So we do it as a collective session where we see how people react, and then we offer some friendly advice, and we get best practice. And
so I think it's really important to go to those sessions, whether you're a student at Wolverhampton or you're a student elsewhere. Go and find out what the expectations of your university's Viva process is. I get lots of students, because I deliver that session, they come into the session and say, oh, my friends at other universities say this happens and that happens, and it doesn't necessarily happen the same in every university. Wolverhampton, there will be two examiners, an internal examiner and external examiner, unless you're a member of staff, and then there will be three examiners, one internal, two externals, and there will also be a chair, and that chair is an independent person who chairs the Viva, but not all universities have a chair. Some universities have an internal examiner that acts as both internal examiner and Viva chair. So it's good to know what you expect from your university.
And to be very familiar with the outcomes.
Yeah.
Because there is some variance in the outcomes. I mean, generally, everybody will have a pass, an award on the day, which is a very unusual outcome.
Yeah.
An outright fail, which is unusual. But there will be a resubmit for a lower degree of an MPhil, but there will be perhaps either a year of corrections and changes that could be a resubmission, or there'll be a shorter period, which will be 3 months, that will be called minor corrections. Some institutions have a 6-month period as well. And if there may be an option for a second Viva, and beyond that second Viva there may be a more limited number of outcomes, which would be a 3-month correction period, but not a 12-month. But I think you should familiarise yourself with the regulations, and I think the workshops allow a familiarisation with those regulations.
So just for those students who are at Wolverhampton, our outcomes are pass outright, pass with minor modifications, in which you get 12 weeks to make your corrections, a resubmission,
which is 12 months.
Which is a 12-month. You can be asked to do a second Viva with a resubmission, and if you have a second Viva, you can. The limited outcomes are minor modifications, which are done within 4 weeks. There is then resubmit for MPhil or fail. And we get very few of passes outright, fails, or resubmit for MPhil. Basically, if you get to Viva, it is likely you're going to get some corrections and get your doctorate.
Which is also useful to know that you're not presenting something as the perfect final draft. But there's going to be some conversation, there's going to be some changes, and I think it's good to get your head into a space where you accept that there may be some changes. And I think that's quite a liberating feeling, that you can discuss with the absolute experts in your field the quality of your work and what they recommend to enhance or improve it.
Very true. Just to add, for those people who are a professional doctorate, they won't be asked to write up for MPhil.